Hey guys, I wanted to do a really quick thought experiment here. So I've been thinking about the concept of value between eggs and sperm. Now TFM as well as Karen Strawn have already talked about this. Now don't get me wrong, they are right about it, but I view the whole dynamic just slightly differently. And this is what I was hoping to get a bit of criticism on. So feel free to comment on this. Feel free to be highly critical of what I'm about to say because I'm open to being wrong and I want this to be an open discussion. So the value ratio between eggs and sperm is often equated to rarity as well as how common it is. Women generate one egg every cycle, and men generate thousands, if not millions, of sperm every second. And unlike men who can pretty much generate sperm for the rest of his life, women, on the other hand, have a finite number of eggs that they can generate throughout their lifetime before they're just completely done. As a result, women have a much smaller fertility window, and you have clinics that are willing to pay like $10,000 an egg or something like that, whereas ejaculating in a cup for a sperm bank only gets you a few bucks. So when you initially think about the imbalance, you're thinking, yeah, this doesn't sound fair. But in actuality, when you think about it this way, it kind of balances itself out. So first, I want you to try and imagine women as gold mines, silver mines, or whatever, which all have a finite amount of resources that can be mined from them. But in reality, eggs are what you're mining here. So try thinking of eggs as something like gold or another precious metal that has some sort of intrinsic value, and think of sperm as money or some form of currency. So first we're going to focus on the egg part being compared to gold and other precious metals, because sperm is a bit more complicated and it's going to take a bit longer to explain. Now gold as well as other precious metals, they have obvious value for obvious reasons, and they're highly sought after for their uses and their purposes. So the properties of each metal determine how useful it is, as well as contribute to the value. So given that, rarity alone isn't necessarily what's going to determine its value the most, because you have a metal like osmium, which is very rare. It's rarer than gold, but yet it's highly dangerous. It's very, very toxic, and it doesn't have nearly as many uses as gold. So therefore, gold is going to have a higher value. So given that analogy, think of a normal, young, healthy, and fertile woman's eggs as gold, as opposed to some woman who is actually 40 years of age or older. Her eggs are going to be more akin to osmium. Now, both of them are going to have value, but gold is going to be more valuable than the osmium. Now, the reason I think osmium is a good example here is because once a woman reaches a certain age, those eggs are going to be of lower quality and they're going to be a little less desirable, because at that age you're more likely to be having downy babies and babies that have other forms of birth defects and so on. Now, I'm pretty sure that you guys can think of a lot of other different examples, but I think the list is seemingly endless, so we're going to move on. So next we're going to compare sperm to modern day currency. Now, I believe they have more in common than you might actually think here, because with sperm, not only can you just print more of it once you're out of it, just like you would with paper money, is that it can also be backed by various things which give it its value. So let's think of every single man on earth as his own little country with his own little economy going on. That country's money, aka that man's sperm, has to be backed by something in order for it to have value. And it could be backed with all sorts of things. It doesn't necessarily have to be something with intrinsic value, such as Leonardo DiCaprio's sperm is backed by his money, his career, his fame, and so on. Whereas Johnny Q. Public, who lives homeless on the street, is a former veteran. His sperm isn't really backed by much at all because he's homeless. He doesn't have much. So obviously, the currency of Leonardo DiCaprio's country is going to be more desirable than Johnny Q. Public's country. So if you had a few metric tons of gold, would you A, want to trade that gold, assuming you needed some form of paper currency in a form of US dollars or British pounds, or would you want to trade it for the Zimbabwean money or South African money or whatever? So obviously you're going to want to trade your precious metals for the most valuable currency out there, especially currencies that have a good track record of maintaining stability, such as the Kuwaiti currency has the highest value of any currency in the world right now as of 2019. So from a financial standpoint, it just would not make any sense, at least not to me, to invest in Zimbabwe's money, which is literally worth, for every $100 trillion, is really just worth 40 US dollars. So in relation to hypergamy, that's if women actually have this sort of option, they're obviously going to choose the currency of Leonardo DiCaprio as opposed to Johnny Q. Public. Because if something doesn't work out, then they could always just take Leonardo DiCaprio to court for child support, alimony, and they will have a worthwhile investment. Whereas with Johnny Q. Public, who's homeless living on the streets, they don't have that type of insurance and essentially have little to nothing to fall back on. That being said, it actually takes work to maintain the value of a currency, whereas precious metals have value all on their own. And sadly, most world currencies are not really worth much. But here is the good news. You see, there's very little you can do to actually raise the value of a precious metal aside from increasing the grade and actually increasing the purity from the ore. But with a currency, you can improve the value dramatically based on the choices you make in your life. I mean, having a better career is one, saving, planning, and investing for the future is another, owning a home, owning a nice car, all of that good stuff. It all counts towards the value of your currency, or should I say your perceived value to women. On that note, you could probably even artificially inflate the value of your own currency, similar to how Bitcoin was just one giant bubble. But to be frank, I wouldn't exactly count on that. But speaking of perceived value, before I forget, other races of men are going to have advantages as well as disadvantages over others. Example, white men are going to have a higher value by default than black or Indian men. And that's largely due to both stereotypes as well as observable reality. So there's really no point in me getting too deep into that because I think we all know exactly how that works. So my point is this. I do believe that sperm, aka currency, can exceed the value of gold and other precious metals, aka eggs, depending on what that currency is actually backed on. But that currency can still lose value even if it's very valuable if there's too much currency still in circulation. Meaning, let's say there's a bunch of women that are taking Leonardo DiCaprio to court for child support and alimony, similar to what happened to Robin Williams. Then that economy, aka that man, is going to go bankrupt and collapse. And I wasn't exactly trying to be funny making the Robin Williams reference either, because it's very, very serious. So with that being said, I hope you like this analogy here. And if you agree with it or disagree with it, please let me know in the comment section, because I am open to finding out if I had missed some sort of aspect when it comes to this. I'm just a random guy with a slightly differing opinion. And that's pretty much it. So Shogun's done, and I'll see you next time.